My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 44 years old and I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not a millionaire. I'm just a man who spent 16 years of his life building something that wasn't his name. I started at Vantage Systems as a junior infrastructure engineer when I was 28 years old. Fresh out of a second job, paying off student loans, eating lunch at my desk every single day because I genuinely loved what I was building. I wasn't the loudest person in the room. I wasn't the most polished. I didn't play golf with the executives or show up at the right parties. But I was the one they called at 3 a.m. when the servers went down. I was the one who stayed through Christmas Eve in 2019 to make sure the migration didn't fail. I was the one who rebuilt the entire client data architecture from scratch after the security breach of 2021, alone, in 2 weeks, while everyone else went on scheduled vacation. Vantage Systems wasn't just a job to me. It was my identity. And for 16 years, I gave it everything I had. What I didn't know was that the whole time I was building their foundation, they were already planning to pull it out from under me. Let me paint you a picture of what Vantage Systems looked like when I joined. Small company, 43 employees, 2 floors of a shared office building in downtown Cincinnati. The CEO, a man named Gordon Hale, had founded the company 9 years before I arrived. Back then, Gordon was the kind of leader you respected. He remembered your birthday. He knew your kids' names. He'd walk the floor every Friday afternoon and shake every hand. I believed in him. Most of us did. Over the years, I watched Vantage grow. We went from 43 employees to over 300. We moved into our own building. We won government contracts. We became one of the most trusted infrastructure firms in the Midwest. And through every phase of that growth, every system upgrade, every server migration, every platform rebuild, I was the one holding the foundation together. By year 10, I was senior infrastructure director. By year 14, I was running a team of 22 people and overseeing a code base that touched every client we had. 311 clients, a system I had personally architected, maintained, and protected for over a decade. That system was worth, conservatively, $5.3 million in development value. The lawyers would calculate that number later. I didn't know it yet. What I did know was this. When that system ran smoothly, nobody said a word. When anything went wrong, they called Daniel. For 16 years, I was fine with that, because I thought we were building something together. The first sign something was wrong came 18 months before the end. I just didn't recognize it for what it was. A new executive joined the company. His name was Preston Walsh. He came from a consulting firm in Chicago, arrived with a sharp suit and sharper opinions, and within 2 weeks he was sitting in on meetings he had no business being in. Preston had a gift for talking about systems without understanding them. He used words like streamline and modernize and right size. He spoke in slides and bullet points. He had never once written a line of code in his life. But Gordon loved him. Suddenly, Preston was in every leadership meeting. Suddenly, my reports were being routed through Preston before reaching Gordon. Suddenly, decisions I had been making independently for a decade required executive alignment. I told myself it was just corporate restructuring. Companies grow. Things change. I was a technical guy. Maybe they just needed more business structure around the work. I kept my head down. I kept building. The second sign came 8 months before the end. Preston asked me to document everything, not just project summaries. Everything. System architecture, fail-safe protocols, emergency recovery procedures, every workflow, every shortcut, every custom solution I'd built over 16 years. He called it a knowledge transfer initiative. He said the board wanted better documentation across all departments. Something in my chest tightened when he said it. But I ignored it. I spent 4 months writing the most complete technical documentation Vantage had ever had. Every secret of the system, written down, in plain language, handed over. I handed them the key to everything. And I didn't even know I was doing it. The product launch had been 18 months in the making. Our biggest client, a federal infrastructure contract worth $42 million, required a complete platform migration. New servers, new architecture, new security protocols. Launch day was Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. I had been preparing for it for 6 months. My team had run 47 test cycles. We had contingency plans for every possible failure scenario. I knew that system the way a surgeon knows a patient. On Tuesday night, I was still at the office at 11 p.m. doing final checks. Everything was green. Everything was ready. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Not a call. An email. From Gordon Hale. Subject line: Important update regarding your employment. I stared at the subject line for a full 10 seconds. My hands weren't shaking yet. My brain hadn't caught up to what my eyes were reading. I opened it. Daniel, after careful review of the company's strategic direction, we have made the difficult decision to eliminate your position effective immediately. Your access credentials will be revoked at midnight tonight. Please ensure all company property is returned within 5 business days. We thank you for your contributions to Vantage Systems. That was it. No phone call, no meeting, no conversation. 16 years. Dissolved in 4 sentences. Sent at 11:47 p.m., the night before the biggest launch in company history. I sat in that chair for a long time. The office was quiet. The screens were still glowing green. Everything ready. Everything working. And in 13 minutes, I would no longer have access to any of it. I could have sent an angry reply. I could have called Gordon's personal number. I had it. I could have walked into Preston's office and flipped his desk. Part of me wanted to do all 3. But I didn't. I took a long, slow breath. I closed the email. I opened a new one, addressed to Gordon Hale, Preston Walsh, and the entire executive team. And I typed 2 words. Good luck. No period. No exclamation mark. No explanation. Just, good luck. I hit send at 11:53 p.m., 7 minutes before my access was revoked. I shut down my workstation, picked up my coffee mug, the one my son had given me that said "World's Okayest Dad," and I walked out of the Vantage Systems building for the last time. The security door clicked shut behind me, and I stood in the parking lot in the November cold, and I felt something I didn't expect. Calm. Not peace. Not happiness. But a strange, quiet calm. Because in that moment, I knew something that Gordon and Preston did not. They had just fired the only person on earth who truly understood what was about to happen at 9 a.m. I slept better that night than I had in months. My wife Karen sat with me until 2 a.m. while I told her everything. She didn't panic. She held my hand and said, "They'll figure out what they lost by morning." She was right, just not the way either of us imagined. At 7:14 a.m., my personal cell phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. At 7:31 a.m., a text from my former colleague Marcus. Daniel, the migration environment isn't responding. Preston is losing his mind. Do you have a number we can reach you at for a quick consult? I set the phone face down. At 8:09 a.m., Gordon Hale himself called. I watched his name light up on my screen. I let it ring. At 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes before launch, I received an email from the company's legal team. Mr. Mercer, Vantage Systems is requesting your immediate assistance on a critical technical matter. We are prepared to discuss compensation for your time. I read it twice. Then I made myself a cup of coffee. At 9:00 a.m., the launch was supposed to go live. At 9:04 a.m., Marcus texted again. It's down. Everything is down. The failover didn't trigger. The clients are already calling. At 9:22 a.m., I received a call from a federal contract liaison I had worked with for 3 years. I answered that one, because she had nothing to do with what Gordon and Preston had done. I told her calmly that I was no longer with the company, that my employment had been terminated the night before. She went very quiet. Then she said, Daniel, the platform is completely unresponsive. We have federal deadlines tied to this launch. I said, I know. I'm sorry. I hope they find a solution. And I meant it. Not sarcastically. I genuinely hoped they would find a solution, because I already knew they wouldn't. Not without me. And not quickly. Here is what Preston Walsh did not understand about the system I had built. The documentation I had spent 4 months writing was accurate, every word of it. But documentation tells you what a system does. It doesn't tell you why certain decisions were made. It doesn't tell you about the workaround I built in 2019 after the vendor's update broke the primary authentication layer. It doesn't explain the custom patch I wrote that sat quietly in the background, keeping 3 critical processes synchronized. It doesn't warn you about the 7 specific trigger conditions that would cause the failover system to ignore an outage instead of responding to it. Those things lived in my head. 16 years of accumulated knowledge. 16 years of problems solved and lessons learned. You cannot document institutional knowledge. You can only carry it, or lose it. They lost it at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. By noon on Wednesday, Vantage Systems had contacted 3 outside consulting firms. By 3 p.m., the federal client had formally escalated the outage to their oversight committee. By 6 p.m., Gordon Hale had called my number 11 times. I answered on the 12th. He didn't apologize. Not right away. He asked if I could come in, just to take a look. Off the books, he said. Discreetly, he said. I asked him one question. Gordon, why did you fire me the night before the launch? Silence. We can discuss that when you come in. I said, no, we discuss it now, on this call, or I wish you good luck. Again. He told me. Not everything, but enough. Preston Walsh had presented a cost-cutting proposal to the board 4 months earlier. The proposal included outsourcing the entire infrastructure division to a third-party firm, a firm that, as I later learned, Preston had a prior consulting relationship with. The numbers looked good on a slide. Projected savings of $800,000 annually. The board approved it. My position, along with 6 others on my team, had been marked for elimination the moment that vote passed. The plan was to fire us after the launch, after the hard work was done, after the migration was complete. But something changed in the final week. The outsourcing firm's contract had been moved up. They were starting Monday, so the terminations were moved up too, to Tuesday night, the night before. Not because it made business sense, but because of a contract scheduling conflict. 16 years, erased because of a scheduling conflict. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, Gordon, I'll help you, but not off the books, and not quietly. You want my help? You put it in writing. Emergency consulting contract. My rate is $400 an hour, minimum 40 hours, non-negotiable, and I want a formal written acknowledgement that my termination was procedurally improper. Another silence. Gordon said, That's a significant ask, Daniel. I said, Your federal contract is worth $42 million, and right now it's sitting on a server that nobody in your building knows how to restart. So I'd say $16,000 and a letter is a reasonable ask. Wouldn't you? I went back in on Thursday morning, not as an employee, as a consultant, signed contract in hand, $400 an hour, 40-hour minimum. The office felt different when I walked through those doors. People looked at me differently, not with pity, with something closer to relief. Marcus met me at the elevator. He shook my hand and held it a second longer than usual. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I spent 6 hours restoring the system, found the broken trigger in the failover protocol, identified the authentication conflict that the new firm's setup had introduced, rebuilt the synchronization patch from memory. At 4:17 p.m. on Thursday, the platform came back online. 31 hours after it had gone dark. The federal client sent a formal note of acknowledgement. The launch was rescheduled. The contract held. Preston Walsh was not in the office that Thursday, or Friday. The following Monday, I received a call from Marcus telling me Preston had stepped down to pursue other opportunities. I thanked Marcus, wished him well, and invoiced Vantage Systems for $16,000. They paid it within 48 hours. I want to tell you what happened after, because the story doesn't end with the invoice. Within 3 weeks of leaving Vantage, I had 3 consulting offers. Word travels fast in infrastructure circles. Apparently, being the man who got fired the night before a federal launch and then fixed it in 6 hours is a compelling resume item. I started my own consulting practice in January. By March, I had 4 clients. By the end of the year, I had 11. My rate went up to $600 an hour, then 8. I was earning more in 3 months than I had earned in an entire year at Vantage, working fewer hours, answering to no one. My son started calling me the comeback kid. He was 17 and thought that was hilarious. I thought it was pretty good too. Karen and I took that trip to Portugal we'd been postponing for 6 years. 2 weeks, no laptop, just sunshine and slow mornings, and the feeling of a man who had finally stopped giving his best years to people who didn't value them. As for Vantage Systems, the outsourcing arrangement lasted 8 months. The third-party firm underdelivered on 4 consecutive contracts. 2 major clients walked. The federal contract was reduced at renewal. Gordon Hale retired, or was asked to retire, depending on who you ask. The company still exists, but it's smaller now, quieter. And somewhere in their server room, there are still systems that bear the fingerprints of a man they let go at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. People ask me sometimes what I meant by good luck. Was it sarcastic? Was it passive-aggressive? Was it a warning? Honestly, it was none of those things, and all of them. In that moment, standing in that empty office at 11:53 p.m., watching 16 years compress into a 2-word email, good luck was the only thing left to say. It was a goodbye. It was a release. It was me choosing not to beg, not to argue, not to lower myself to the level of men who fire loyal employees by email at midnight. But it was also, I'll be honest with you, a quiet knowing. The kind of knowing that doesn't need to announce itself, because morning always comes. And when it does, the truth becomes obvious to everyone. If you are sitting somewhere right now, giving everything you have to a place that doesn't see your value, hear me. Your knowledge has weight. Your years have value. Your loyalty is not a weakness. And the people who mistake your quietness for powerlessness will eventually need you to save something they can no longer save themselves. You don't have to say much when that moment comes. 2 words are enough. That's Daniel Mercer's story. A man who gave 16 years and walked away with 2 words, and built something better the moment he did. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt invisible at a place you gave too much to, drop a comment below. Tell me, what would your 2 words have been? And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share this video with them. Sometimes the best thing we can do for someone is remind them that being let go is not the same as being finished. I'll see you in the next story.